During last month's COP26 conference in Glasgow, Scotland became the global focus of action to combat climate change, and the nation's own ambitious environmental targets were lauded. But today some doubt has been cast on the ability to deliver them. It came in a report from the Independent Climate Change Committee, which advises administrations throughout the UK. The report says Scotland's promise of a 75% cut in gas emissions by 2030 is lacking detailed strategies on how it will be achieved. The same goes for the longer-term mission to achieve net zero gas emissions by 2045. The committee believes that major changes are needed across the Scottish economy. The Scottish Government Net Zero Secretary Michael Matheson said he was grateful for the report, which he will carefully consider. He spoke to the committee chairman, Lord Deben, and the climate campaigner and blogger, Laura Young. Lord Deben, could you outline briefly what the Climate Change Committee was saying about Scotland and what it's hoping to achieve?
Well, we've congratulated the Scottish Government on having very high standards and a real determination to try to reach net zero, indeed to reach net zero by 2045, and that of course has been supported by the Scottish Parliament. Now the problem is that we still don't have a detailed programme to achieve that end. We're not really meeting our promised annual targets, and what we've asked the Scottish Government now to do is to make absolutely clear how they're going to achieve the ends to which they perfectly properly put their name, and particularly in some areas like, for example, land use and transport, a whole series of things where the Scottish Government is setting an example to the rest of the United Kingdom in its aims, but not yet in its clear method of delivering those aims.
Laura, that's part of the question for you. It's all very well setting targets.
Yeah, it's great that we have targets and it's good that they are ambitious. But one of the problems is we don't know how to get from A to B. We don't know whether that's going to be with lots of government help, whether that's going to be public or private funding, whether that's down to me as an individual. And we don't know what the policy and the funding is going to look like to get to that point. And that's where the worry comes in, particularly when this is such an urgent issue and when the targets are creeping up. The year 2030 is not that far away.
Realistically, Lord Deben, do you think that some of these targets that the Scottish Government has set out are achievable?
Oh yes, I think they are achievable. They are tougher than the ones that we suggested in some areas, but the Scottish Government, supported entirely by the Parliament, has fixed on these, and therefore we are very determined that we will help them to reach them. But the real issue all the way across the board is that after such a successful conference in Glasgow, Scotland is going to be looked at very carefully, not least in this coming year, because during this year, of course, the British government will still be the presidency of the COP, and it will be very necessary for Alok Sharma to complete that work. And the more that the Scots can show that they're actually implementing what they have promised, the more it will be possible to get other people on board. And that's, after all, what we have to do to make COP26 a real success.
Of course, COP was such a big deal here in Scotland, with the world essentially coming to Scotland for that. Is it your sense, Laura, that are you as confident maybe as Lord Deben is that these targets are achievable over the next 10, 15 years?
They are possible, but it's whether we are on the right trajectory. And when you look at the history of Scotland and our climate targets over the last 10 years, since about 2010, we've only met our targets 3 times. So I'm looking at our track record and saying I don't think it's possible with the way that we are going just now. And when you think of such ambitious targets, but without the policy and the funding and the route that we're going to go down, it seems quite unlikely. And I don't think COP was an overall success. We didn't get everything that we needed from it. We saw progress, but we didn't see justice. And so I think it's important that we really stop talking about targets. It's actually a little bit boring sometimes. We actually then talk about how we're going to do it. And that's the bit that we haven't received today. And I think that's the bit that's worrying.
So, just on a basic level, what would you like to see? What do you think needs to be done more?
Just more clarity. When we talk about, for example, car miles are going to be reduced by 20%, what policies are going to be put in place to help that happen? Or is that going to be up to me as an individual to not use my car a fifth of the time that I normally would? There was also lots missing around aviation and around peatlands. Now, as an individual, I can maybe stop flying, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do about peatlands. And so we need to really get some of these areas critically looked at and the policies put in place. And I think there was about 70 suggestions made to the Scottish Government, and lots of ministers have it in their capabilities to work on these issues. So we need to see that work being implemented and the progress being made.
Well, David, what are some of the principal recommendations out of that 70, some of the main ones that you think could be actionable?
Well, I think the work to be done on the peatlands is a very good example. We have got to recover the value of our peatlands through the whole of the United Kingdom by 2045, and Scotland has a particularly important part of that, and we very much believe that Scotland must really get on with it. And also with land use generally, it's terribly important that agriculture is much more able to sequestrate, to take in carbon, which will be part of the answer. Now, there really is no land use policy that has yet been detailed. And I think that Laura is absolutely right. The issue is that people cannot know what to do unless you have the detailed arrangements. And it will be the government working with private sector. Individuals, we must all play our part. But you can't solve these problems unless the government really gets down to delivery. And my one word all the time now is delivery. We need both to be optimistic that we can do that, but we also have to have that other word, apocalypse, in our minds, because frankly, if we don't achieve this, then we really are signing the death warrant of our planet.
Is it too late, Laura, almost for 2030 to start putting these plans in place if they're not already there?
It can't be, and we can't use that language, because as soon as we start talking about things being too late, we start to be defeatist and give up. The point is, it is possible, we just need to get moving now. We're already a month on from COP, soon we'll blink and we'll be a year on from COP, and it rolls on like that. And so the important part is we just need to start setting these things in motion right now, and use that legacy of COP as a springboard, and the UK presidency more largely, to really get that momentum moving.
And is it your feeling, Laura, that the public will go with this? If we start saying, right, you stop using your car so much, you stop using this, you stop using that, will the public buy into it?
I would change the language from stop to move over to, nobody wants to have to stop doing things, but actually it's about a transition, a just transition for everybody. And I think people are on board. Ever since we've had the Blue Planet movement, people have been concerned about plastic and waste and the climate. And I think it's important to know that the public are on board, but we need a little bit of help. For example, transport. We need public transport to be more accessible, more affordable. We need taking a flight to be the last option on your list. And that goes for any sector that we're talking about. So we need the help and we need the guidance, and that's what we need now, rather than the reliance on individuals to do all the work for us.
And finally, Lord Demon, despite the detail, you would at least applaud the ambition that's been shown here in Scotland.
Oh, yes, I applaud the ambition. I have been telling the rest of the United Kingdom how they ought to copy Scotland. So no one can say that I haven't underestimated or failed to support what the Scottish Government has sought to do. But we are now coming to the point at which we actually have to do it. And I very much like Laura's point that we're a month on, and that month is one more month wasted if we don't do what we have to do.
Lord Demon, thank you for joining us in Scotland.